Hello there guys and welcome back to the channel. So today's video we're going to be taking a look at Sunspot and we're going to be reviewing him, and oh my god, look at the damage. Did he just hit for 35k? That is a 4-star 330. Jesus Christ, that must be illegal. But no, Sunspot can do some really good damage. We are going to be explaining how he works. I'm going to have like a full Winter Soldier fight, sped up like massively just because it's going to take a while. But the base idea is he starts with his flare charges, and then every time you make contact with the opponent, you use a flare charge to place an incinerate on opponent, and you do that for each of your flare states. You gain additional flare state each time you throw level 1. So if we are in 3 flare states, every time we hit opponent, we expend 3 flare charges to place 3 incinerates on opponent, and if we run out of flare charges, then we lose all our flare states. Using level 3 does recover all of our flare charges. Also, whenever opponents under incinerate debuff, we can charge our heavy attack and we can recover them ourselves and gain power. So basically, I'm sure you guys have seen how Sunspot functions for most part. So you play a lot with your heavy attack, you build up your flare states, and then you throw your special attacks. So typically, like my Sunspot's like Sig 40, something like that, and if I want to keep on his flare states on for entire fight, with 4 it's problematic. I can keep up 3 for most part, relatively easy. With 4 I quite often struggle. Now that is only for like long fights. Typically, because you deal quite a bit of damage, you will finish off most of the fights within a couple of cycles of your level 3s. Therefore, you can in fact go and try and build up to 7, build up to 8, I think is the most I have had gotten. And that's about it. So if you are at max Sig, obviously that will help you a lot because his signature ability gives you additional flare charges, and you can go up to 120. And if you're on 120, for sure, like you can easily play on like 4 flare states, definitely. But that's about more or less it, how he functions. So you need to throw some level 1 attacks, build up your flare states, and then drop massive level 2. After your level 2, you need to get to your level 3 to recover all of your flare charges and basically get to another level 2, then level 3, and so on and so forth, and do a lot of damage in the process. Any additional bits of utility? He has interesting perfect block mechanic. Whereas if you kind of dexterity or parry opponent's first hit of a combo or a special attack, you have perfect block for the duration of that special attack. So that definitely can become in handy, especially because every time you parry, you also purify and incinerate and gain power and recover your flare charges. So that is quite awesome. And also he's incinerate immune. That is becoming more and more relevant, which is helpful. And lastly, the fact that he can spam debuffs on opponent like no tomorrow also makes him synergize extremely well with Despair Mastery. So there is that. However, when it comes to playstyle and practicality, well, and the best I can say, there isn't really a lot, because in order to do all of these fancy things, fancy mechanics, you need to be able to parry stun opponent. You need to make sure they don't have any immunities. You need to make sure they don't have limber on, and that alone kind of makes him a fairly gimmicky character for me in majority of the game content. So do I think he is like an amazing, insane damage dealing champion? Not really, no. Because once again, it is fairly conditional. So you need to be able to parry opponent in order not to run out of your flare states. You do massive burst damage on your level 2s, but aside from that, his damage output is fine, and incinerate damage is not. And also, you need to continuously get your level 3s and wait out level 3 animations, and we all know what I think about characters that rely on their level 3s a lot. Typically, they're definitely not my cup of tea. And I'm definitely not a fan of his playstyle, but I know that it is going to be posted everywhere and how hard he can hit, because as a maxed out 5-star, he can do some insane damage. He can do like some 400, 300k special attacks, and that's good. That is definitely not a bad thing to do. However, as soon as this fight is over, we're gonna have a quick comparison fights. And even though his huge numbers and relatively low hit count in every fight makes it appears that he has absolutely insane damage, it's not bad, but it's definitely being overestimated at this point, and I will get to explaining that in a second. So we did have a small miss up here, but regardless, I'm not gonna say irregardless anymore, because that is not a proper word. But speaking of improper things, I also think it is improper to look at somebody's damage output just by the number of hits they land on opponent or how big and flashy the numbers are there. Time is arguably the most important factor when it comes to measuring somebody's damage output. And so even though Sunspot hides behind a low hit count and big shiny numbers, he can't hide from time. And when it comes to actually measuring the amount of time it takes to finish off a fight with Sunspot, even like in the best of conditions. So here we are taking on 20k Black Bolt in Act 5, right? We have built up a bunch of flare states. We're about to nail a massive level 2, and it's gonna crit enough to kind of finish the fight out. So perfect condition fight for Sunspot. We ramped him up to 5, we're gonna get to level 2, and we're gonna close out the fight. However, when it took a look at the time he's gonna take it, it's gonna be about a minute, right? And then we're gonna compare it against some relatively good damage output champion. So it was 37 hits, definitely impressive. 37 hits, can't knock it, right? Can't knock it at all. But next, let's take a look how Venom does. And Venom has some good damage. He's not the beastiest damage dealer out there, but he definitely is no slouch either. So let's compare the fight. So we are landing more hits per second, right? And here is gonna be the tricky bit. So Venom is going to take 57 hits to take down this Black Bolt. This is exact same Black Bolt that we fought with Sunspot. And there are no class advantages, class disadvantages involved. So it will take us 20 more hits, right? However, Venom is going to be able to finish this out a couple of seconds faster than Sunspot can. So even though we take a lot more hits to take down opponent, when it comes to actually measuring out the time, Venom has better damage output, even if it's not better damage per hit landed. So even though I saw some 565 Sunspot gameplay earlier today, and yes, you can take down Realm of Legends Winter Soldier in like what, 50 hits, 60 hits, but it still took over 2.5 minutes. Like Omega Red can do that stuff in a minute and like 10 seconds. Domino can do it sub-minute. Hyperion can do it in like a minute and something. And all of those characters have something in common. They're much better and much more versatile and can be used in many different areas of the game. And when it came to actually the time it takes down to kill Winter Soldier, they did it in half the time it took for Sunspot to do it. So now even 3-star Carnage, and I'm using this fight just to kind of further illustrate the contrast. 3-star Carnage, so he is lacking in attack and health department, because 4-star 330 is slightly kind of beefier typically than maxed out 3-star. However, 3-star Carnage takes hardly any longer than Sunspot does. I think he did need an extra 10 or 15 seconds. However, at the same time, we're going to be landing well over 100 hits. So Sunspot finished out the fight with 37 hits, right? Which is impressive. But is it? Because Carnage will land 140 hits in pretty much the same amount of time it took for Sunspot to deal with this guy. So I just don't want there to be any kind of misconception. Yes, you will see good damage numbers out of Sunspot. That's amazing and cool, I suppose. But when it really comes to taking a look at how quickly you can dispatch of opponents, then there is completely entirely different debate. Yes, with Carnage, for instance, you land many hits, you need to bait out more opponent's special attacks. Versus Sunspot, you don't have to deal with opponent's special attacks as much. However, still the point stands, it's not just the hit count or just the numbers you see. It also matters A, how you get there, what kind of hits you land, and unfortunately in case of Sunspot, you rely on opponent not to be stun immune, on opponent not to have any limber or anything of the sort active. So you need to be able to charge your heavy attacks, build up your flare states, land a bunch of your special ones, so on and so forth. So I do not think it is a really practical way to play the character. And that is where this review would have ended initially. But then I realized what happens if we don't kind of play in the hands of what everybody has been telling us how to play Sunspot and how to use him, and the fact that you need to charge constantly your heavy attacks. And what if we simply build a couple of flare states, leave him at 3 flare states, for instance, in this case, and just go at opponent. And when we do that, yes, we do lose some damage output. And yes, it did take slightly longer. However, at that time, he becomes easy to play character that has good power gain mechanic should you have time to use it. And his damage output still is good. It's nothing to knock about. And what everybody was saying, as far as I have heard of Sunspot, is that do not rely on his incinerate damage, that doesn't matter. But when you play him this way, it does. It will not provide as much damage as those huge level 2s will do, but then immediately Sunspot becomes a lot easier to play. And you don't have to rely on parrying opponent, you don't have to rely on opponent not having limber. You can play him as a regular character that has incinerate immunity, that will constantly keep opponent under absolute ton of debuffs, therefore preventing all of their heal. So essentially you're going to be heal blocking everything, entire fight, super easily, getting to your level 3, resetting your charges and going at it. And his base damage output is not bad, and I think he becomes much more user friendly, much more kind of better champion to play, because you have options how to play him. If you can unleash his big damage output, that's great. If you can't, I suggest for majority of the fights just build up a couple of flare states and keep opponent under incinerates. You will still do good amount of damage. It's not going to be bad by any means, and he's going to be a lot easier to play with. And that, I think, is what kind of saved Sunspot in my eyes. Because if his damage output would be rubbish, if you do not do exactly what you're told to do, basically build up your flare states and then drop massive level 2s and make sure if your incinerates are there and try to purify and all that, then I think he would be an awful champion. He would be a nice gimmicky champion, good for some videos and some interesting things, but overall when it would come to user friendliness, I wouldn't rate him high at all. However, now that I tried playing him as like a regular champion that does a lot of incinerate, and you can refresh those with your level 3s, and you don't have to worry about constantly parrying opponent or constantly charging your heavy attacks, I like him much better. I think he is a decent champion. He's nothing game breaking. He can do some interesting things, he can do some insane damage, but there are plenty of characters who do insane damage and a lot more. If you want some crazy good numbers, look at Obsidian. Obsidian can put just as good or even better numbers out there. But the fact that you can play him as a regular champion that has a chance to have like a perfect block, and that perfect block ability is kind of a bit of double-edged sword, because you will try to parry a lot of special attacks instead of kind of dexing them, and you might mess up. So that kind of like takes a bit of practice and stuff. But overall, I like Sunspot a lot better, since I realized that you don't necessarily just have to rely on building your insane amount of charges. And also, last thing I wanted to mention is the leadership synergy. Sorry, I didn't mean leadership, I meant strategic sabotage, as the synergy Quake has with Nick Fury, and that gives you the 3 away charges, and that kind of makes Sunspot a lot more user-friendly when you are actually trying to go for the big numbers. So if you are running Quake and Nick Fury, Sunspot works really well with those, just because then you can actually pick and your time and safely get back your incinerates even if your opponent isn't under parry, because you can just dash back. Like for instance, after level 2 typically you would lose pretty much all of your incinerates just because you end up baiting out opponent's special, and while that's happening all of those incinerates fall off. But with this synergy you can drop off your level 2 and immediately start charging your heavy attack to gain your incinerates back, gain power, get an additional level 2 attack there and be safe. So I do think that synergy really helps him out and kind of like emphasizes on his good bits. However, that will be more or less me done for today. I hope you enjoyed today's review. So once again, I do think Sunspot is a decent character, mainly due to the fact that you can also choose to play him normally with a couple of flare states on, and that I think in my eyes saves the character. But that will be me done for today. I hope you guys enjoyed today's video, and I'm going to catch you guys soon. See ya!